to talk about failure, resiliency, and overcoming imposter syndrome. I feel I'm completely inadequately skilled to do this, which is probably appropriate for talking about imposter syndrome. I've got a conflict of interest. I worked as a paid consultant for Unilever. That has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about today, but it's the first time I've had a conflict of interest, so I'm very excited to be able to announce it. So I'm a lecturer in cell biology. I have a small research group. I do quite a lot of teaching. I'm a module lead for an MSc in regenerative medicine. I'm also a founder member of Skin Microbiome and Healthy Aging, SMIHA. It's a research network funded by the UKRI. So I work on skin research. I'm fascinated by the skin basement membrane and how it has a diverse range of functions in controlling the skin. I look at genetic skin diseases, specifically epidermolysis bullosa. I look at skin cancer, mostly squamous cell carcinoma, and I look at skin aging. I do this with charitable grants, with research council funding, with industry funding, and industry collaborations. So I'm going to talk to you today about failure. As we heard in the last session around publications, most of your publications, when you submit them, that will be rejected. But in research, people don't talk about this. We talk on our Twitter accounts, and I'm guilty of this. We post our latest, greatest paper. We post our greatest grant, latest grant, but we don't talk about all the many, many papers that got rejected, or the many, many times a paper's been rejected. And we don't talk about all the grants that didn't get funded. So this gives sort of an artificial sensation of sort of success to people sort of coming into the field, and especially junior colleagues. I still consider myself to be very junior in the field. So in research, failure is almost built in. Looking at the published success rates for grants, it's an interesting exercise and slightly depressing. These are success rate for grants that have already got through the sort of triage phases. So these are top quality grants that have gone through to the final phase. At Wellcome Trust, about 90% of grants that get through to this phase will get rejected. Across all the UK RI, the government-funded research organisations, 80% will get rejected. In the areas I am working in biological and in medical research, we're talking between 70 and 80% of all grants get rejected. And it's the same when we try and publish things. So looking at some of the top journals, Nature rejects 93 and a bit percent of the 92 and a bit percent of the papers that get submitted to it. Science rejects even more. Even wonderful open access journals like PLOS ONE, who have a much more open approach to publishing, still reject more than half of the papers that get submitted to them. So if failure is sort of built into research, should we really be talking about it as being failure? I like the idea that it's not really failure, it's feedback. And on that sort of note, I'm going to use a quote from Dr. Abdul Kalam, the 11th president of India, who knew a fair bit about succeeding and about failures along the way. He suggests that you shouldn't read success stories. You only get a message. If you read failure stories, you'll get an idea of how to get success. So on that theme, I'm going to talk to you about how I ended up where I am now as a lecturer in cell biology. I'm going to talk about successes I've had along the way and the failures. And throughout this, there's a topic about resiliency. So resiliency is an interesting idea. It means the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's synonymous with toughness. But if you go into material sciences, it's also synonymous with elasticity. So the ability to be able to bounce back from failure or from setbacks. And definitely throughout my career, being able to be resilient, to be able to bounce back has been incredibly important in terms of being able to continue doing what I love, which is science and the teaching of new interested minds in my field. So please don't tell any of my colleagues, but I didn't always want to be a skin researcher. Obviously, I wanted to be a pirate as a small child, and my first steps into the research labs were in the Hoffman lab in Edinburgh, looking at crystal structures of proteins, and then going to York, looking at developmental biology, and at AstraZeneca as a master's student, looking at NMR structures of proteins. And along the way, I suffered my first failures. As a 6-year-old, I couldn't grow a beard, and you can't be a pirate without a beard. And in projects I did at Edinburgh, at York, and at AstraZeneca, I failed to secure funding for a PhD position. We were interviewed, we got quite far, but they weren't able to succeed to get funding for me. So I was left sort of, again, looking for something else to do after these setbacks. So I looked in different fields, and I looked into skin, and I found a PhD that was really interesting, looking at chronic wounding. This took me to Cardiff, introduced me to Professor Phil Stevens, who has been a great sort of mentor and support through my continuing career. I learned about cell biology, I learned about extracellular matrix, both are things that I still work on today. I presented posters, still couldn't grow a beard, and had some amazing experiences. I got my first independent grant, a few £1,000s, to go and visit the Behaviour Institute in Cambridge. We put in more grants. We wanted me to continue working in Cardiff and continuing as a postdoc. By this point, I'd managed to grow a beard and was looking decidedly more piratey. So we applied for a postdoc fund, looking at how skin recruits cells into it. This wasn't successful, so I started looking around again for another job. I had this idea in my head that this computer's frozen. That there was problems getting funding in wound healing, and all the funding I saw was going into cancer. So I looked around and I found a wonderful position at Imperial College, working with Sturge and Jonathan Waxman, looking at prostate cancer metastasis. So how prostate cancer spreads through the body and how it ultimately sadly kills the patients. I started doing work on 3D models. I presented my work all over the world, slightly more relaxed with my presentation style at this point. I also got married. So life goes on, even though you maybe aren't quite exactly where you want it to be. During my time there, I applied for over £500,000 worth of grant funding in fellowships, in direct grants to me, some of which almost got funded. We were still ranked 10th from over 100 grants, and they funded the top 9. Properly disappointing, but it left me again looking for a job, looking for something else to do. One of the problems of my entire time at Imperial was trying to get prostate cancer samples. Apparently, it's really hard to get men to give you samples of their healthy prostate. I can't imagine why. So I moved back into skin. Skin was much easier to get samples for, and I found an amazing project looking at the skin-based membrane with Professor Edel O'Toole here at Queen Mary University. She took me in as a postdoc. This was over 10 years ago. I continued working for her as a postdoc, and she allowed me to start applying for my own funding and supported that. So I was able to apply for grants, apply for fellowships, apply for research grants. I also had 2 children in the time I've been here. Again, life goes on, and it's important that you don't allow things in your life to sort of stop just because you're not quite where you want to be in your career. So I applied for fellowships, I applied for research grants, I applied for lectureships. All of these were unsuccessful until I got my first grant. The British Skin Foundation gave me almost £90,000, which I used to hire my first postdoc, Dr. Larry Jones. Larry's still with me in my lab 5 years on, and she's just been awarded her own first independent grant. So I've been able to sort of pass on and pass forward some of the support I got. I still wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing, which was running my own research group. And another sort of point, another thought is that there's not always the perfect job. The perfect job doesn't exist. Good jobs can pop up. And an opportunity arose for me to become a teaching lecturer or a part-time teaching lecturer at Queen Mary. So they have these posts, they only do teaching, they're not research active. And they agreed that I would spend half my time being a lecturer, doing teaching, and half my time still being classed as a postdoc, doing research. It wasn't ideal, wasn't great. It did allow me to start calling myself a lecturer, which helped in the grant applications, gave me some level of stability. I applied for, again, hundreds of thousands of pounds of the grants to these funding bodies, all of which were unsuccessful. I did have some funding success. I got almost £500,000 worth of funding, which allowed me, even though I wasn't supposed to be doing research, to start growing my research group. And last year in September, I was able to apply for a full-time teaching lectureship. So using the experience I gained as a part-time lecturer, translating that into a full-time position. A little bit, again, around resilience and around sticking with things. I got the contract for this position 45 minutes before I would have been made redundant from my existing contracts. And again, I've applied for funding, and in the last 9 months, I've applied for about £750,000 worth of funding, and have successfully received about £500,000 of research funding, while also getting multiple rejections along the way. So I've talked about sort of my failures, resilience, the fact that you keep on getting up, keep on going, keep on finding a new thing, things that have helped me along the way. We were hearing in the first session about mentors. So I have a number of different mentors who each give me different different parts of their expertise in teaching, in research, in management. I cherish my mentors. They're the reason I'm here. I do a lot of networking. I have had grants because I've networked. I've got onto boards because I've networked. I like talking to people and talking about my research. It's massively important, as is peer support and supporting your peers. So I try and help as much as I can, my junior colleagues, my staff who are working for me, and anyone who needs help. I spend a lot of my time helping other people, and I usually get that help back. I sort of meandered in my career from different aspects, different areas of research. This wasn't necessarily my plan A, sitting here working on skin. So have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D, and be resilient. If this is what you want to do, pick yourself up and stick with it. But remember, don't be afraid to ask for help. The last part of this talk is about imposter syndrome. So this is the feeling that despite objective success, people suffer from a persistent self-doubt, a fear of being exposed as a fraud or imposter. Some papers at the bottom. This was first described in 1978. Recent studies suggest that depending on how you interpret imposter syndrome, up to 82% of academics may have imposter syndrome or feel they're in some way have self-doubt about or are a fraud in their positions. This is even higher amongst minority groups, whether those be ethnic minority groups or LGBTQ plus groups. It can also be clinically associated with depression, anxiety, and ironically impaired job performance. So imposter syndrome is a huge thing, and it's sort of very hard to, in a couple of minutes, to sort of suggest ways of fixing it. There are suggestions for ways of managing imposter syndrome. There's loads of blogs and articles and things out there to give the same suggestions. These sort of barrel down to remembering that if the stats are right, most of the people who are around you will also have imposter syndrome. So talk with others, listen to their feedback, listen to how they're doing. I presented this sort of talk at a conference. An amazingly successful professor running a large research institute came up to me and said that she had horrendous imposter syndrome and always feels like she's a fraud. She's the most successful person, but still feels that she's not doing it. So you're not alone, talk with others and listen to their feedback. Look at yourself objectively. If you're in a job, you are hired based on your abilities. You haven't been fired yet, and that's probably because you're good at what you do. Resist the urge to compare yourself to others. Other people are always going to be doing better than you or more exciting things. That doesn't matter. What are you doing and what are you doing well? This is a conversation I have with my students quite often. Focus on how your task is progressing, not on how perfect it is. So progress rather than perfection. You're never going to have something that's absolutely perfect. You can have something that's going really, really well. And remember, celebrate your successes. Keep a happy file. If people are giving you nice feedback, if people have said good things, note it down, jot it down, keep it in a file. So if you're feeling low, if you're feeling down, you can look at it and try and use that to objectively look at yourself. And if you are feeling some of the linked things, the depression, the anxiety, and you're feeling this is getting down on you, ask for help, please. I know my university has anonymous counselling services that are available for students and staff. So take advantage of what's being offered. Don't sort of suffer in silence. So coming to the end of my 15 minutes, I've been resilient. I've bounced through my work because of the people who've been supporting me. These are some of the people I've missed, probably dozens of, who've helped me through my career, through my time, and have helped me be resilient. So thank you to them. Thank you to you for listening. If you want to contact me, here's my email, my Twitter. If you're interested in skin microbiome and how it's altered in healthy aging, scan this QR code and join our network to get interesting emails about this. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm really happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was brilliant. So I will ask some questions in the Q&A. So we have one question from Jasmine Benjamin, who's hosting our next panel. And Jasmine asks, do you have any mantras or anything that you say to yourself when imposter syndrome starts to arise?
I don't, and I probably should do. Yeah, one of the people I had on my big list to say thank you is my wife. And I talk to her a lot about what's going on, how I'm feeling. And she does with me. She's an incredibly successful genetic counsellor, is amazing in her own field, and also feels that she's a fraud and isn't doing very well. So we both basically talk to each other and tell each other off for being silly and not seeing objectively how good we are. But I should probably try and work out a mantra or something to sort of say to myself myself in the mirror in the morning, rather than which is my normal sort of mirror response. Normally 6 a.m. and I've just been jumped on by a small human because I was looking comfortable.
And I was going to ask something along similar lines, where, you know, we are all told a lot throughout our careers that it's important to celebrate our successes. So what are some ways that you celebrate your successes?
I like going to the pub, and I like taking people with me and buying them beer or wine or fruit-based alternatives depending on their choice. So we have a lovely pub around the corner from the institute, and that will be where people will be if they've had a big grant, if they've had a good paper accepted. You go out, you talk to people, you chat about your successes, and you share the love. And thank people who've helped you to get there, because if you have been successful, it's very rarely been because you've done something by yourself amazingly. It's usually you've done something, been supported by our imaging facility managers, been supported by our administrators, been supported by your colleagues who've helped you put the data together. So yeah, I like to do that. We also go out for take my lab group out for lunch. We'll do dinners. We're trying to plan a summer event which may or may not involve axe throwing later in the year, just to sort of celebrate that we've had a good year. We've made it through. The lab's another year older, and we're still doing well. So yeah, social things are sort of my go-to, because it's nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that strengthens teamwork and sense of community as well. So that's always a great thing to do. So we have another question from one of our attendees. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce your name. So Rushikane O'Neill. And they ask, how do you find a genuine mentor? And when you do, how do you set the right boundaries? Like, how do you know when to ask them for help and when it should be stuff that you can do on your own?
So the mentors I've got, they've developed sort of organically. I was talking earlier today about a mentor I had when I was finishing my PhD, Vera, who she nothing to do with looking after me as a PhD student. She's in my department. I just chatted to her and we got on, and I sort of asked her for advice about things, and she looked at my CV, shouted at me in a way that only a German could, and told me to stop being so English and stop putting myself down and being self-deprecating. And I think she's solely responsible for me getting my first job. So the best mentors I've have happened naturally, and they've always been, as it's been discussed earlier, they've always been sort of open to coming and chatting. I like sort of informal mentor-mentee discussions where you're chatting maybe over a coffee or just in the corridor about how things are going and that sort of thing. So you found a good mentor when there's someone that you're comfortable chatting to and can give you good advice, and if they are a good mentor, then they should hopefully be open to talk to you when you need them. So and sort of find the time for you. So yeah, that's sort of, I'm thinking about my experience, but that's sort of my sort of thoughts on the mentors I have and my interactions with them. Occasionally it's done over wine, albeit, but usually it's a high-speed coffee as we're both dashing off into different directions.
Brilliant. And we've got someone in the Q&A has just asked if you could share your email address again, Matthew, in the main event chat, because she missed it on the end of your presentation.
I don't think I'm in the main event chat. I'm just in the private chat at the moment, but you're perfectly well. So it's, yeah, m_caley@qmul.ac.uk. I am semi-Googleable. There's another Matthew Caley out there who's a poet. If you get into a sort of page with poetry, then you've gone the wrong way.
Brilliant. I will make sure that Lucy gets your email address. And we've got one more question from Sam, actually, before we wrap up and move on to our next panel. And Sam asks, does writing down your successes and failures help in a cathartic way, like for a presentation like this?
Yes, is the short answer to that. You think a lot about what again, talk about the grants, think about a lot about the grants you've got, because they're the ones that you're running, you're spending, but you can also see the amount, it's often easy to forget the amount of hard work you've done into things that haven't been successful. So it's interesting, it's nice to be able to see that, where your time's been spent. It's somewhat frustrating, but it is very good to be able to do that. And to sort of look back at, take the time to look back at what you have done, where the high points are, and just remember that I've been remembering a lot about the people who've helped me get here, as I've been trying to put them down. The people who taught me, June, who taught me how to do tissue culture. The first people who looked at my first ever research presentation back when I was in Edinburgh. Those sort of things. So it's nice being able to remember the people who've helped you along the way, and the good bits, even though there's obviously lots of, I still don't like failure, but lots of failures and lots of things that haven't worked along the way. Yeah,
brilliant. And we've just had one final question come in, and we do have time, so I'll ask this quickly before we wrap up. So James Flanagan has asked in the Q&A, are you particularly proud of any of the times that you've been able to help and encourage people through difficulties or overcome failures?
Hugely. So I'm massively proud of my postdoc Larry getting her first independent research funding. That's sort of made my day. But I have students who I mentored who did MScs through the lab, who have gone on and done PhDs and are doing amazing things. And it just makes me happy seeing and trying to keep in touch with everyone who's sort of gone through the lab and done great things. So yeah, I'm incredibly proud of a lot of my students and the postdocs who've worked sort of with me and for me, and the amazing things that they do, and I sort of bask in their glory. It's their hard work, but it's also I hope I've helped in a little way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Matthew, are you able to join the event after this talk to maybe have a chat and answer any questions, or do you need to head off?
No, I should be able to join in.
Amazing.
So, yeah, go over to the main chat and sort of try and sit in there and talk. Super.
Yeah, brilliant. I will make sure that you get in there. Thank you so much again, Dr. Matthew Caley.